weaknesses, to win our battles, and to be able to move on. And a lot of us can testify the fact that we get stuck somewhere and we can't move on. We can't seem to make a forward progress in our walk with God. Our growth is stunted. It is delayed. And we find ourselves weak because we are malnourished spiritually. We didn't allow ourselves to be fed and to be saturated with the Word, so that in many situations in this life we do things our own way, the way we know how, and then we experience defeat. It is kind of frustrating, not just disappointing. It is frustrating when you realize day after day after day that you struggle, and especially if you're struggling with the same kind of sin, which we call pet sins. Pet sins are the things that we do in violation of what God has commanded us, and they are the same sins that we confess over and over and again and again. And then we realize, why am I not winning this battle? Why am I losing this fight? And here we learn that the people of God, as they were led by Joshua, they were able to make progress. Now you see, they were in Egypt for a long, long time. They were slaves. They didn't have their own freedom until God raised a man called Moses. And then Moses did his part for so many years in the wilderness, 40 years to be exact. But then it was time for Moses to hand the baton over to a man named Joshua. Now remember the background of this. Joshua was one of the two spies who were sent from Kadesh Barnea, which is just 11 days journey, into the promised land. And the spies went, all 12 of them. Caleb and Joshua brought back positive report. They believe that that land is theirs, as promised. The 10 spies did not believe. They continued on in unbelief and gave a very negative report. Partly true, but not completely correct. That in the land that God has promised, there were giants. But it is wrong to assume that all the inhabitants are giants, and that there's nothing that they don't stand a chance, right? There's nothing that they can do to win their battle or the war. Long story short, Joshua was given the task. He went in, and for 32 years, he led them, won battles. And we come to the point when in our reading in Judges that it came to pass that Joshua died. So now, this is a new challenge for them. Who's going to be their leader? And noticeably, you find that there was not one man appointed by God, right, to lead them. As was, not like, when Moses led them, or when Joshua was leading them. This time, there's no leader. And so that was God ushered them into a period in the history of Israel we call like the period of the Judges. So God was forming a commonwealth in which God was king. God was king. He was the one speaking to these people. Am I right? Now, let's move to chapter 2, and you find a very interesting part of this story. In chapter number 2, an angel of the Lord, verse 1, came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and I brought you into the land which I swore unto your fathers, and I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down the altars. But listen, this is a sad commentary coming from God himself. But you have not obeyed my voice. And the question that God was asking is that, why have you done this? I need an explanation. God was giving them a revelation of what was in his heart regarding this people. And then in verse number 3, "Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare unto you." Verse 4, "And it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spoke these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept." Verse 5, "And they called the name of that place Baccalaureate, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord." This was directly coming from the mouth of God. The voice of God speaking to them. Now, what have we covered so far? We said that these people in chapter 1 have given us, when you look at this, if you would like to summarize, chapter 1, it's like the people giving reasons, or I may use the word excuses, for not winning their battles. We said that the number one reason was that it was common sense. It was common sense for them to, yes, go into battle. There's no option to disobey. The question that they asked God, because they don't have a leader anymore, so Lord, there's still a big task that remains, right? The task remaining. Who shall go up first? They said very clearly. They asked the question, who shall go up first? Because there were 12 tribes. And there were half tribes as well. Don't forget that. And there were tribes outside of Canaan on the Jordan side. But then who shall go up first to fight against the Canaanites? And God clearly said, Judah shall go up. So like I said last Sunday, Judah was first at bat. Because there were many of them. As a matter of fact, chapter number 9 records partly the successes of the efforts of the tribe of Judah and Simeon. But for the most part, let me put emphasis on that. For the most part of chapter 1, the defeat, the failures of the rest of the tribes, 9 tribes altogether, to finish the task. 32 years after they have crossed Jordan River, they were still there. Remember how they failed in the wilderness, so that many of them died there. The generation that went in to start this conquest was a new generation. Remember, 40 years. Majority of them died in the wilderness, in the desert. But God would not give up on them. And if there's one thing that we need to learn here, this is it. That we have a God who is a covenant maker, but He also is a covenant keeper. Aren't you glad? That God covenanted with you like that, just as He covenanted with His people back then. AJ sang a song that touched our hearts today. When the oceans, when the waves overwhelm you, when you feel like you're drowning and you're going fast. Have you ever felt that way? How about literally? How many of you have experienced drowning, literally? Oh wow, quite a few. I've experienced that a couple of times. And you would panic, right? You thought that this is the end of your life. Kuya Pat, did you raise your hand? Because I know a story. Right? when you don't know what to do anymore, and that song says, look, is it above? The waves. Above the waves. Things in this life can be overwhelming. And our human instinct, with our God-given faculty, we, first of all, would try to do what we know what to do, right? Most of the time, I don't know if you agree with me, we go into a situation, we don't quickly pray. We pray when we find out we're in trouble and we're not in control, we can't do anything about it.